Right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to let folks kind of stream in here for just a few seconds. And hello. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you've grabbed your sandwich and you're ready to talk money. We've got you for about an hour and 15 minutes today. And as people are continuing to stream in, I'm just going to welcome you all to say good afternoon. Welcome back to another session in the SEEK Forum. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the Statewide Best Practices Coordinator. I want to thank you for joining my Spotlight event, which we are calling How Local Governments Can Be Competitive in Today's Funding Climate. And with that, I'm just going to give a brief shout out to the folks that have provided some financial support for this forum, including the 3 regional energy networks and our other sponsors, as well as our promotional partners who have helped us extend our outreach and hopefully have brought some of you in today. So thanks to all of our partners. You're probably pretty familiar with Zoom, but a couple of housekeeping items. Please be sure to keep yourself muted. And if you'd like to speak verbally out loud, you can raise your hand if you want to be unmuted. We're also going to be tracking questions through the chat box, so you can see the chat feature. And as we get going here, I'd really like to encourage you to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat so we know a little bit more about who's here. You can also share your screen or share your webcam. This is actually a meeting, so we would love to see your faces if you're comfortable with it, or you can reach you can reach out to SEEK staff. We have Serena Soar and Kelsey Wolf-Cloud, and I believe Gabby also here with us today. You can reach out to them at any point in time for technical issues. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's lunch event. So I'm going to do a little bit of ground setting here early on in the agenda. And after that, I'm going to be joined by experts that I've invited to review changing trends in relevant energy and climate funding sources, including eligibility and selection criteria. All of our speakers are going to give some tips for how to write a competitive proposal to advance your organization's strategic goals. So we're actually even going to get to the point where we have a live demo of how to review a solicitation for things like fit, deal breakers, score boosters, and more. So you're going to leave this event with some tangible information that you could really take home, and also access to a bunch of helpful grant writing templates too. There's going to be some time at the end for Q&A, and you'll also, before we do that, we're going to share some information from SEEK about what kind of resources we are offering through a brand new webpage we've developed called our Funding Resources webpage to help identify new ways to pay for those initiatives you're working on. And so let's go ahead and meet our speakers for today. Like I said, I'm Angie Hacker. I'm going to be the moderator today. As Statewide Best Practices Coordinator for the SEEK program, I'm really honored I get to advance knowledge amongst local government practitioners like all of you on the line and help them meet their energy and climate goals. And I've heard from many of you that funding is a huge priority this year, more than any year potentially. There's a few ways I can try to provide support, including through educational events like today. And to help me with this topic, I've invited 3 speakers. So we have Lupine with the Strategic Growth Council, Katrina Leni-Konig with the California Energy Commission, and Josh Simmons with Prosper Sustainably. And I'm going to introduce all of them more properly before their portion of the presentation. But before I go further, I do want to hear a little bit from our audience. So please do continue chatting your introductions. And Gabby, if you wouldn't mind launching the poll. There we go. I'd like to hear your perspective. So you're coming in today. How are you feeling about funding for local energy and climate initiatives? So you have a few options there. Satisfied with existing options for local government? Maybe you're disappointed with it, the lack of options. Are you feeling optimistic, discouraged, confused, or maybe you are just jamming? You're informed and ready to submit highly competitive applications for your community's needs. So go ahead and select which one is most applicable for you today, or you can select more than one. On any given day, I feel any of these. All right, so let's just give it another second or two. All right, do you want to go ahead and share the results? All right. So mostly people are feeling optimistic. That's probably why you're here. And I bet I know why, because there's a lot of really good news starting to come out about funding. A lot of you still feel confused, which is another good reason to be here. So thank you for joining us, because I understand, and here's a slide to prove it. So, before I pass it on to our speakers, I wanted to set the stage for the topic a little bit more. What is today's funding climate? This picture here is a live simulation of how I feel every day trying to wrap my head around the changing landscape for funding. And I used to be in many of your positions, and I support people in your positions all the time. And we're really, at SEEK, trying to support you as much as we can. But here's what I know you're dealing with. I know many of you have a tremendous amount of change in front of you. Your role might have changed during the pandemic. You might have lost colleagues. Internal budgets have been cut. Your energy and climate initiatives may have been delayed. You might be still reeling or regrouping from the loss of IOU funds for your LGP. Or maybe you're one of those governments that saw the writing on the wall early and you formed or joined a CCA or a REN. Or maybe you have a third-party agreement with an IOU and you have a whole new scope and scale of ratepayer resources and possibilities in front of you. Or maybe your community's gotten hit by these climate effects, a wildfire has come through, or some other reality of rising energy costs or the expensive nature of energy costs. And maybe it's starting to invest its own dollars into avoidance and mitigation. I know others are trying out different financing mechanisms, things like energy performance contracting. But I imagine all of our attendees have this in common. We know local governments are key to delivering California's energy and climate solutions, and we know that the time to act is now, as the IPCC report has reinforced this week. So all this means we need to access more grant funding to do the big work that has to be done over the next several years. This is a little chart I put together to try to highlight what is driving major changes in funding and how that's translating into funding opportunities for local governments in California. And so first we've got drivers. What's driving it? Drivers might include things like changing policy priorities. And I don't have to tell many of you, we've been talking about it all forum long. We have carbon neutrality goals. We have a rising interest and commitment to equity, environmental justice, and serving disadvantaged communities. Electrification is a really important topic right now. And then the dovetail and the intersection with climate resilience, disaster mitigation, health, economic recovery. These are all huge priorities that are affecting actual funding opportunities. At the same time, we're seeing changing financial conditions, which means basically we have a once in a generation moment ahead of us where we have the state with a huge surplus, which it has already decided to dedicate about 3.7 billion to climate resilience, which helps us out as folks in clean energy and climate action. Public goods charge, we're lucky to be in California where we still have the public goods charge. We have an EE budget, we have cap and trade auction revenues that are continuing to flow. And then huge changes at the federal level, 1.9 trillion that came through in the American Rescue Plan Act, which we are beginning to see the blossoms of solicitations coming out from that. We have $1 trillion being proposed in the American Jobs Act, big shift happening this week in Senate. And then another 3.5 billion being considered through budget reconciliations and budget resolutions. So all this stuff, right? You're hearing about it, it's dizzying. And this blue box, this blue arrow here in the middle is basically a bunch of administrative actions. So when these drivers hit agencies, they're given money, they're given direction. They oftentimes have to go out and do some kind of a needs assessment. They scope these programs out and they're asking for input all the time, more than ever. And so you have an opportunity here to do a lot of shaping. And you also have an opportunity to kind of factor in what are these new requirements that we're starting to see that are coming out of these policy priorities? What requirements are these funding opportunities going to come with? As well as what technical assistance is now becoming available to support you as you're trying to go after these funding opportunities. So I'm not going to go through what the funding opportunities are in a great detail. I'm going to share with you down the line here in this presentation where SEEK has started to compile funding opportunities, but you guys kind of know generally where they are. The point I'm going to leave you with here is that sometimes it doesn't look like what you expect it to look like. And we're no longer in a paradigm where the IOU, EE dollars are everything, and we're just going to wait for our formula allocation. We have to maybe get more creative about where we look and dress our stuff up in stuff that applies to other kinds of funds. Like we're going to end up talking about something under economic development today. Okay, the last thing I have to say here is just, we know that there are challenges. This is actually coming, this list is coming from a report that was written by Susie Moser and Julia Kim and others about adaptation financing barriers, but it's all true for local governments, climate and energy initiatives as well. And in my mind, what I see is the challenges are sometimes the funding just doesn't exist. It isn't eligible to local governments. And if it does, sometimes it's too prescriptive or sometimes it's really hard to get. And the main point is that access to funding requires capacity, and yet capacity requires access to funding. And this is especially true when we're talking about communities that are most under-resourced, marginalized, and disadvantaged. But fortunately, I have somebody here with me today who understands that little catch-22 better than most people in the state. So I would like to introduce Ina Lupine. She leads the Strategic Growth Council's California Climate Investment Technical Assistance Program, which helps create a more equitable playing field for more under-resourced applicants looking to access funds to transition into climate smart communities. So she manages capacity building activities for applicants. And I'm really happy you're here today, Ina. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Angie, and thanks for inviting me to this forum. I think it's such an important topic, and I'm really glad to be able to talk with you all today a little bit about the Strategic Growth Council and some of the programs that we have available, as well as happy to also share a little bit of what I've witnessed through my work in this role. So I guess we can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to go over a little bit the California Climate Investments Programs, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, but just want to make sure that's certainly something that's a really great opportunity to be paying a lot of attention to. I'll touch on the California Climate Investment, on the Strategic Growth Council as well, and talk about the programs that we have at SGC. And then, as I said, talk about some emerging trends and advice to all of you. So next slide, please. So the California Climate Investments are essentially all of the funds that come from cap and trade, and they're really distributed across a number of different state agencies and help address climate through a ton of different strategies. They're focused on disadvantaged and low-income communities in the state in many ways. And so maybe we can go to the next slide. Great. So there is a prioritization of California Climate Investments funds to disadvantaged communities. And many of you are probably aware of this, but CalEnviroScreen is the tool that we use to be able to designate disadvantaged communities in the state. We're currently on 3.0. There is a 4.0 that is coming very soon. And then we also look at low-income communities through AB 1550. So one thing to note is that while these funds are definitely prioritized towards disadvantaged communities, if you are not a disadvantaged community or don't qualify based on these definitions, it doesn't mean that you're not eligible at all for the California Climate Investments programs. It really depends program to program, the way that we're tracking, the specific allocations to different communities. So certainly keep an eye out and look into the details of the program guidelines to better understand whether or not your community is a good fit. Next slide, please. So at the Strategic Growth Council, we're actually a cabinet level state agency, and we work on achieving sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. And we have a number of investment programs that are mostly funded through the California Climate Investments, as well as some collaborative policy initiatives and policy and planning work that we do. And the role that I have is mostly focused on capacity building and technical assistance. So I'm really excited to talk to you all about that today. Next slide, please. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about our investments programs in case any of you weren't familiar with what we have available at SGC. So the first that I wanted to mention is the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. This is a continuously appropriated program. So it's available every year, and it's a really great opportunity to fund affordable housing near transit and to fund transportation infrastructure in your community. The grants are up to $30 million. And so it's a really great opportunity to check out if you haven't yet. I know all of us around the state are definitely in need of more affordable housing. Next slide, please. The next is the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. This is also a continuously appropriated program. And we have agricultural easements that are funded through this program, but we also do agricultural planning grants, which really, I think, are a great opportunity for local governments to be thinking more specifically about agricultural preservation. And so I would definitely encourage folks to check this opportunity out as well. Next slide, please. And then lastly, in terms of our investment programs, I wanted to talk about the Transformative Climate Communities Program. This is a really unique program that is actually on an annual appropriation cycle. So we don't currently have funding for it now, but we do have a climate budget that's coming forward soon. So we'll see whether or not we have funding for the program, hopefully before the end of the year. But this program focuses on the most disadvantaged communities in the state and is really working to transform them through a community engaged process, putting a significant investment into coordinated climate projects that can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also have a number of different co-benefits to support communities in moving towards a more climate smart future. Next slide, please. Great. So the California Climate Investments Technical Assistance Program is the program that I manage. And as Angie explained, we are working to help support particularly under-resourced communities in applying for California climate investments programs. So I think we can go to the next slide here. Great. So we do have technical assistance that's available for many specific programs. So certainly reach out to us if you're interested in a specific program and would like technical assistance. But we also recently released an application for a new program that we are in the second round of now, which is working with local governments to provide flexible capacity building and technical assistance support around meeting your climate and equity related goals. So we can go to the next slide, please. So through the program, we offer trainings, partnership development, community engagement, planning and implementation support, grant application assistance, communication support. So really a wide variety of services that are meant to be tailored to the specific needs that your community is seeing. Next slide, please. And so in order to be eligible for the program, you need to be a city or town government, be in a disadvantaged or low-income community, have some type of staff capacity challenges that you can talk about in your application, and a desire to work on projects related to the goals of Boost, which, as I mentioned, are really focused on climate and equity. So we released the application just this week. They'll be open until September 10th, and then we'll be selecting communities by October 6th. So definitely check out this opportunity if you get a chance. We'll be having a webinar next Tuesday to provide more information about the program. Feel free to reach out to me if anyone is interested in that. Next slide, please. So now I just wanted to provide a little bit of guidance from my perspective on emerging trends and some advice and tips for all of you as you're applying for these programs. Next slide. In terms of some of the trends, I think Angie covered a lot of these already in her presentation, but I certainly agree that there's an increasing focus on equity and environmental justice, adaptation and resiliency, particularly nature-based solutions. Public health has been a really important focus for a lot of programs. Cross-sector collaboration and robust non-traditional partnerships. This is nothing new, I think, for all of you. I know many programs have been pushing for this for a while, but it's definitely something to be thinking about as you're putting together your grants. Community engagement as well as high road jobs and workforce development. And anti-displacement policies is another one that I've been seeing across many grant programs as a consideration. Next slide, please. Great. So in terms of general tips, as I mentioned, partnerships are so important. Really making sure that you are engaging with, non-traditional partners as well. It may not be, the same folks that you've always worked with, but think creatively about who you can work with in your community or in your region, who will really be able to add value to the project that you're trying to do. Carrying out meaningful community engagement is also really critical. Make sure you document it really well and that you can talk about it in your grant application. And be sure to explain how the project will meet the needs that you've seen through your community engagement process. Also related to that is designing projects to advance equity, environmental justice, public health, and resiliency. And really explaining how the project will advance those objectives. Again, it's important to look at the specific program that you're interested in applying to and the program goals, but generally these kinds of important co-benefits are really, really important to make sure that your project is actually having as much benefit as it possibly can and maximizing the benefit that it has for your community. And then lastly, make sure that you find support on greenhouse gas quantification. There are some programs that do have simpler GHG quantification processes, but for the most part, you're probably going to want to get some help. There are a lot of consultants who work on this specifically, and there are many state agency staff who are available to help you, but certainly reach out and ask questions around GHG quantification before trying to dive into something and just powering through, because many times it's more complicated than you might think. Next slide, please. Great, and then just some general advice that I wanted to share with folks. Engage as early as possible in these processes. I think state agencies are really trying to get feedback from folks on the ground and trying to better understand the barriers that might exist for local governments to apply to their funds. So engaging on program guidelines and also commenting on investment plans, such as the California Climate Investment Plan, are really important to be able to kind of make sure that the opportunities that are available at their state level actually reflect what you need to see in your community. And I would say too, for continuously appropriated programs, that they'll be available every year. So start early and really plan it out so that you're able to meet the deadlines on time. And so in terms of paying attention to detail as well, program goals are definitely, something that I mentioned earlier, but paying really close attention to what exactly the funder is trying to do through the program and making sure that throughout the narrative and the way that you talk about the project that you have, that you're really connecting it to those goals and showing them how your project specifically will help to meet the goals that they're looking to meet. Again, program guidelines are incredibly helpful. Make sure to pay close attention to them. And of course, pay attention closely to deadlines as well. Many agencies provide workshops and info sessions that can be incredibly helpful. Happy to respond to your questions. So certainly take advantage of those opportunities. And there is technical assistance in many cases, either formal technical assistance, or in some cases, there's state agency staff who can sort of help you troubleshoot, help respond to questions, and generally be there for you as you're applying. So it does depend a little bit program to program, but it's always never hurts to ask, and it's always good to try to build that relationship with the staff that's working on the program to better understand all of the services that are available to you. And so that's all that I had for today. I'm looking forward to the Q&A session, but please feel free to reach out if you're interested in technical assistance, or if you are interested in our Boost program and have any questions. And thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ina. I really appreciate it. We're so lucky to have the cap and trade auction revenues flowing through CCI in California, and really appreciate all the changes and continued progress that's happening there, and on all your work, Ina. So with that, I'd like to transition over to our next speaker, and please keep those questions coming. We're tracking them for the Q&A session at the end. Our next speaker is Katrina. Leni-Konig. She is a supervisor with the Energy Research and Development Division at the California Energy Commission. Katrina leads a team that supports technology scale-up and outreach efforts to accelerate the transition to a clean energy future for all. Her research areas of interest include sustainable communities, building decarbonization, and energy equity. All right, Katrina, I'm going to leave it over to you, and you can go ahead and take over slides if you'd like.
All right, can you see my screen okay? Great. Okay, so I'll go ahead and jump right in. I just want to thank both Ina and Angie for setting the stage for how we can help local governments in working towards achieving their climate goals. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunities and coming your way, and so I'm going to really be talking about clean energy, more about clean energy innovation. And so I work within the Research and Development Department at the Energy Commission, and I'm going to go ahead and talk more specifically about that. Okay, so California has consistently been a global leader in innovation. Clean energy is really that next iteration of how we're going to transform our society. So as we know, it's an emergency. We really cannot wait any longer, and we need to get the innovations ready, and we need to get them out there into communities and really transform the way that we use our infrastructure. So part of what drives California's innovation in clean energy are our ambitious policy goals. The stats from GoBiz really talks about how California leads all states with 485,000 clean energy jobs, and 27% of all renewable energy jobs are in California. 58% of these jobs are from small businesses. So this is also really about economic development for the state. Evolution of the clean energy industry will not only help us to achieve our climate goals, but will also, if we take care of how we invest those funds for greatest impact, it can also provide needed economic development and lead to significant benefits for our communities. So SB 100 set us on the path towards 100% clean energy by 2045. The California Energy Commission works to support California to achieve these goals, and our research and development programs support this work by investing funds into technological innovation. And so we're really focused on the technologies themselves, and then also demonstrating the technologies in the real world. Our EPIC program is focused on electric technologies, and we invest over $133 million annually. That's increasing slightly with our next investment plan. Our natural gas program is investing $24 million to decarbonize our natural gas system. And this includes research into decommissioning our gas system and also developing hydrogen technology. So it's about decarbonization. Where are we going to go to reduce our use and consumption of fossil fuels? Our food production investment program comes out of the CCI investment, so we really appreciate those funds to get that program started. We've got a new allocation of funds to continue that work going forward to support our food production industry decarbonize, and that's a large industry in California. So we're really grateful for those funds. So Ina really set us up for what it looks like to be a successful applicant. So I'm just going to hit again on some of those points. She really gave a great overview, and all of what she said is really applicable to how we consider, what we consider for a strong application. But I'm also going to add in a bit of the technology aspect. So because EPIC is a research and development program, we're really looking for technological innovation. So we want it to be cutting edge. We want it to be groundbreaking, really transforming the way that we're utilizing our energy, storing our energy, and building resilience. That also leads to that high impact piece, right? So not only is the technology a huge, it's leap forward with the technologies that are available today, but it's also high impact in that it's bringing those co-benefits that Ina discussed. So we want to see reduction in air pollution. We want to see see lower energy costs to consumers. We want to see those technologies more accessible and easier to use. We want to see that those technologies can work with other technologies and they can be scalable in another community. She also talked about key partnerships, and I'm just going to emphasize that. I'm going to share some tools with how what we've developed to help people find partners. I saw that come up in the chat, and so partnerships are critical. One of the challenges with EPIC is that it is very technical, and so you do need folks that understand that the technical aspects of the project, but you also need experts within the local government, the community, knowing how to work and engage with the community. And so CBOs, whenever working within an under-resourced community, we actually require that a community-based organization be a partner on a project and have them be a paid project partner. And so we'll look that there was that meaningful community engagement that Enid had discussed and mentioned, even in developing the proposal, but then also throughout the project timeline. So we want to make sure that we have that community support, everyone's on board and they're taken care of. And then we want to make sure that the project is feasible, and that's capturing the three elements that I discussed before, that the technology is feasible, that the benefits are feasible, and that you have those key partnerships to make for a strong team to execute and implement the project. And then very basic with regards to applications, I want to emphasize this. Don't wait till the last minute when you apply. We've seen challenges for folks, and sometimes not all application materials get uploaded, and it's really hard when we cannot look to applications because not everything was submitted on time. So the application needs to be complete, needs to be submitted on time, and it needs to address the solicitation scoring criteria and guidelines. So go through that and look at the solicitation manual, see that you've addressed all those points. Answer them, and even following that guideline is a nice kind of outline for you of how to structure your submittal. And then you want to submit a quality deliverable, something that's an example of your work, because when we see a quality deliverable, we're going to know that the project is also going to result in deliverables from the project will be of high quality. We'll be able to share them with the public and be proud of what's been submitted. So put your best foot forward on that application, and taking the time to do it is really important, and giving yourself that grace period. I know it's hard to work up to the last minute. You want everything to be perfect. So don't wait till that last hour to submit. All right. And so I just want to talk about local governments as partners, because when we think about technology innovation, we don't always consider local governments as innovators. But at this point in time, we need local governments to be innovators. We need them to be adopting those early stage technologies, to be taking those risks, because if we don't take those risks, we risk a lot more, right? So we need to be taking leaps and bounds forward. So I'll go ahead and just talk a little bit about the technology development pipeline and where local governments fit in. So EPIC R&D really supports kind of the early stages of technology development. This is because the VCs and the private firms weren't supporting this. So government really had to step in to continue the R&D to get it to commercialization. And so research and development begins, a prototype or proof of concept is developed, and that might be tested in the laboratory, but then it needs to move into pilot demonstration. And that's where the local governments can really start to be partners in innovation. And this is where we're inviting you to come in and be a host site for these new innovative technologies. And so from there, it can begin to move into first target market and so forth, and just grow into a mature technology that's price competitive with, say, the status quo. So we saw this with solar, right? So we had those early stages, we had a lot of support getting it off the road, and now it's one of our cheapest alternatives for energy. And so this is something I'd like to see with other technologies as well, especially when we think about electrification. So there's huge opportunities for our appliances to be electrified, to be cost competitive, to be reducing our energy burden if we do this technological innovation. All right. So I just want to talk about why local governments are so critical. So when we think about local governments supporting technology and developments, they can become partners in innovation and do host the technologies and have a pilot demonstration in one of their sites. So technologies need this real world demonstration. It gives us the data and the information. It confirms that they're viable and so forth. So there is some inherent risk in that. Some of the technologies are at later stages, and there's a lot more demonstrations or examples that you can really, they're a little bit more safe in that. So there's a different scale of risk, right? So it depends on where you're at, where you want to be with your innovation. You're going to want to pick the right technology for the right amount of innovation that you'd like to participate in, and then also kind of that risk of maybe sometimes things don't work. So you need to also consider that. But really, when we talk about innovations, it's about overcoming some of these technology lock-in barriers. So we often have old standards, codes and standards. We have existing infrastructure. We have old habit, and we often try to fit some of these technologies into these old structures. That's not going to do it. So we really need to start to think outside of the box, get outside of the kind of the red tape, and start to allow for those innovations to really reap the full benefits of their new innovative ways of doing things. So if we look at this light bulb, this is an old Edison formed a light bulb. It's the LED. I'm sure many of you guys have these in our houses. We do not actually need to be making LEDs in this form, but because the infrastructure exists, that's the way we've designed them. And so we're not achieving the full capacity of what LEDs can do from just placing it into this light bulb form. Of course, there's some advantages, but as you see on the panel on the right, there's a whole new world open to us through LEDs. All right, so an example of a local government as a partner, we have the City of Lancaster Advanced Energy Community. They were an early adopter. They're one of 4 projects. So I also want to say there are other great advanced energy community projects out there in Richmond, Oakland, and also Bassett Avocado Heights in East LA. So just wanted to share, these projects are really talking about a new vision, and they're demonstrating a new vision for the future of our electricity system. And they're bringing together various energy resources throughout their community and building resilience, and also demonstrating in this particular project, demonstrating a virtual power plant. So essentially all of those distributed energy resources become a resource to the grid, and they can begin to work and support the grid through their community, but then also they're providing that resilience to their residents as well. So I encourage you to look at those projects, see what they're doing, think about what other elements you'd want to implement in your community, and think about what an advanced energy community would look like in your city. So Ina talked about it. We really want input into shaping our investments. So at
Katrina,
this point,
I'm so sorry, but I think you're showing one slide behind.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that. This was you see the Lancaster? Okay, sorry about that, guys. So this is the Lancaster view. This is the advanced energy community. I apologize. I wish I had this up when I was talking about it. I'm going to just give you a second to look at it. They have residential microgrids. They have a green district that has, renewable generation and so forth. It's all feeding into this aggregated DER management system that can support the grid. All right, next slide. Okay, so shaping up big investments. I'll move into the next piece. So there's really 3 stages when we get into shaping our investments. One is at that investment planning stage. That's where we're at right now. And this is where you can provide input into our big vision of where our investments should go. So this is a great time to kind of get some input, get some insights shared with us, and then from those initiatives, we'll work to develop grant funding opportunities that are more specific. That is also a time you can go to a scoping workshop for a specific grant funding opportunity, and you can provide your input into how that solicitation should be developed so that it has the greatest, provides the greatest opportunity for your community. And then the other place where I also say that you have an opportunity to shape our investments, because you're going to propose a project. When you go and you propose a project, you are proposing an innovation And that's also where our dollars are going to go. So that's kind of that 3-stage process. I want to talk about our EPIC 4 planning themes. So this is sort of the direction that we're going with clean energy, and this is our focus. It's driven by SB 100. So all of this is working towards us achieving SB 100 and allowing for greater renewables into our system. So renewables is part of it, but we're also talking about reliability. So getting through some of the reliability issues that we've had. It's also about distributed energy resources, like I talked about with the Lancaster project. It's bringing together the solar, the storage, the smart devices within the homes, and looking at load flexibility so we can work and support the grid in that way, get over the duck curve for higher renewable penetration and kind of balance things out, make it easier. We're also looking, of course, towards electrification and efficiency. So efficiency is a big part of how we're going to work to achieve 100% renewables. And entrepreneurship. So we have an entrepreneurial ecosystem where we support entrepreneurs, clean tech startups in really growing their business. And we're working to support a just transition. So that's really about equity. It's about ensuring that we have the jobs and the investments allocated where they're most impactful. So we have a few initiatives around and focus on a just transition. And then we also have cross-cutting initiatives such as equity. We have our events that work to support knowledge dissemination and whatnot. So
Katrina, would you be able to wrap up in about 20 seconds? We'll need to move on. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so questions and comments for EPIC 4 can be submitted. I'll pass that information here. So EPIC 4 R&D investments, just go to these links if you're interested in kind of giving us some input. And then I just wanted to highlight really looking at the key partners. It's really important to look at key partnerships. Empowerinnovation.net is our platform where you can actually find project partners. And so that's really the place where you can go and find technology developers, you can find community-based organizations, you can highlight yourself as a local government that's interested and create a profile. And we're also looking towards a call for places. And so we're looking towards a call for places for potential host demonstration sites. We haven't issued it yet, but you're welcome to actually begin developing a place, and we will be promoting this shortly. So you can reach out to me directly if you're interested in being one of the earliest places placed on the site, and people can connect with you. All right, go ahead and wrap it up there.
Angie, you're muted, just in case.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Katrina, and thanks for all that great information, which will be made available to everybody after the event as well. And Katrina, while you're with us, if you wouldn't mind, you can drop some additional links into the chat box for folks, because I know they want to access everything you just talked about. All right, let's move on to our final segment here. And our last speaker is Josh Simmons. He's the president and founder of Prosper Sustainably, which is a community serving consultancy. And full disclosure, Josh and I co-own Prosper Sustainably. So that's the firm that I contract through to serve as your best practices coordinator. So, but I've asked Josh here to tag team this portion of the event with me because he's got 15 years of very successful grant writing experience, awarded over 60 grants. I think combined total, we brought in about $50 million over the years. We're pretty, been doing this a while from federal, state, and private sources. And a lot of his experiences around innovative clean energy, climate change, and sustainability projects and programs. And he also conducts training. So this is right up his alley. I thought he'd be useful. And he's also an attorney. And I just mentioned that because grant writers, there's a lot more to being a grant writer than just being a good technical writer. So things like ingenuity, subject matter knowledge, financial acuity, program design, project management, people management skills. These are all the kinds of skills that kind of go into this kind of work. All right, so Josh, say a quick hello, and we're going to go ahead and dive right in.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so we're going to tag team this first slide a little bit. And what I want to start off saying is really, there are a lot of tips. We could do probably a 4-month training on how to write a grant, but I want to highlight the sort of top pieces. So number one, we're going to go through this 5-step kind of process. And the first two are even before you necessarily see a solicitation. There are some ways to get prepared. And this piece number one, we're starting to see organizations do more and more of because they see the onslaught coming and they want to get funding ready, which might mean things like taking a look at what your pipeline of projects is, or maybe taking a look at what your strategic priorities are for the next couple of years, or your big ideas, which this might be a good year to put them out, and outline those near-term strategic priorities. Think about your internal and external grant capacity, maybe get them in order, and then think about where you might already have some existing grant assets as well as partners. So what are all these things that you might need to organize up front in order to get ready for funding? And so we have some do's and don'ts here. And the thing that we're trying to avoid here is to try not to scramble every time a solicitation comes out, which can be very stressful for your team. And we see it all the time. And one thing I want to share with you sort of up front here is something we're calling a key grant asset template. And this is one of the templates we're sharing with you today, which is basically how you can potentially organize yourself around getting the recurring grant assets together that really can help you have a leg up next time a solicitation comes through. Things like statement of qualifications, relevant work examples, staff bios and resumes, references, cover letters, letters of support. And so also in here, what I want to point to, and I'm going to send you guys a link to it, is a set of grant tracking and writing templates that Josh and I are going to refer to as he continues to talk as well, including things like the right kinds of databases for tracking and templates for reviewing a grant, templates for designing a scope, things like that. So moving on to number two, hopefully you've had a chance, if you have the time to compile these things up front, great. Number two is that you at least need to be looking out for the right opportunities, right? So know where to look is probably the first one. I have some things I'm going to share with you where we're trying to make that easier at Seek, meaning what databases you might look at. You might subscribe for alerts. You might even have, if you have the opportunity to be following the policies and the administrative actions I talked about earlier to see where the funds may eventually come, even better. But here is an opportunity to really think outside the box, not just looking at the usual suspects of funding opportunities, but looking at things that may allow you to do your energy and emission reduction work in, not in disguise, not sneakily, but because they are a part of something else like health, emergency, economic development types of funding opportunities. And so Josh, in the next slide, is going to tell you more about doing initial scan for fit and deal breakers so that you know the right opportunities, and hopefully they're the right opportunities that have fit those strategic priorities that you've thought about under number one. What not to do here, what you're trying not to do is to miss good opportunities or to waste time chasing poor fitting opportunities or opportunities that aren't really fitting your strategic priorities or might creep your mission farther than really is sustainable for your organization. All right, so I'm going to hand it off here to Josh.
Everybody, so this is the world I'm in. As Angie mentions, it's not a matter of just preparing these grant proposals, but I project manage, lead these. So that's helpful to come into these grants with kind of a greater scope. Angie, I want to just say in that we're showing the key grant assets template right now, and then the don'ts were kind of chopped off at the bottom as well. So then the third step on here is reviewing the solicitation and considering the project scope. Usually when I'm tracking grant opportunities in number two, I'm kind of doing maybe a brief look at it to see if I can pull out some kind of key things of whether I know it's going to be a good fit or not, or any deal breakers, and I even may score it. We help some clients do that as well, and through the grant tracking databases we've worked on with them. But this is, when you get to the point where you've identified an opportunity you think is, potentially a really good fit, you then need to spend some time ensuring that you are actually eligible, that it is actually a good fit, and that you're able to fully digest it and not miss any key things. So, considering project ideas, considering partners and getting started on those partnerships, reviewing the criteria, identifying where you can boost up your score in the criteria or elsewhere in the project is a key thing. And then also being bold. You know, I definitely, this is the point where you're kind of ideating. You want to consider how you're going to tell a compelling story, impress the grant reviewers in this phase. And we're going to go through this in more detail in the next slide. You want to avoid missing critical instructions, which I have done before I started adopting this process and developed this process and started using it. Repeatedly navigating a large solicitation. So I've worked on DOE and other solicitations that are 100+ pages long. You don't want to have to be going back and navigating that long solicitation to pull out pieces of information. So, you know, I have a process where I extract and put that other information in a document that I can more easily access it. And then this process helps you avoid wasting time on a bad fit. As I'm reviewing a solicitation, if it does appear to be a good fit, then I'm starting to develop a grant writing plan. You need to treat this a grant writing project, particularly for one that involves a substantial effort, as you would any other project. So developing a project management plan and managing the project is part of this as well. So I'll extract the application components, all the elements, and as you know, things get developed like partnerships, key pieces of information, I'll put those in the grant writing plan, add deadlines, roles, responsibilities, have this grant writing plan that's really the grant management tool for tracking, communicating with those partners, internal, external, that are supporting the development of this grant application. And then this allows us to stay focused on the priorities, in the time sensitive items that need to be attended to, and also strategically pivot as needed. I find very often as I'm working on these proposals that as we progress a little bit further in developing the concept with project partners and the work plan, new ideas, new opportunities kind of develop, and you want to be able to pivot. And if you have a good foundational plan, you're more able to do so. Our advice here: don't go alone. You want to make sure you're leveraging other partners on these. These can be a substantial effort. Don't wing it. That's just a recipe to fail and waste your time. Don't procrastinate. As time goes on, you do more and more of these. You understand what needs to be, what's a greater priority, what you need to spend more time on initially. Don't assume it's going to be easy. These are significant lifts, and you need to plan enough time and resources accordingly. And then also don't miss items by not going through it thoroughly, not putting in your grant writing plan and tracking and using that tool to ensure that you've checked it all off. And then you proceed into preparing a quality application. And this is where you're going to customize those existing assets. You want to make sure you're allowing time to get signatures on various documents, both internal and then with partners. It's important to be detail oriented and thorough. I can't emphasize enough, particularly on the budget. For the funders, they're getting scrutiny from their leadership, their legislators who are tracking certain key metrics, and usually big ones just spending the money. And so, having a very thorough budget down to, planning travel out by, you have trips with mileage, then, that actually something they want to see, and tell a compelling story too. You want this to be something that's going to excite and impress them. What you don't want to do is focus on only what you want. I think both Ina and Katrina both mentioned this. Don't just kind of have an idea and don't consider really where the funding agencies are trying to go. You don't want to leave gaps in your proposal. Really, the goal is don't cause the reviewers to pause. If they're pausing and considering and thinking about why this is missing or why this doesn't really fit, you're going to start losing points. You're going to start reviewing the rest of the application negatively. Next slide, please. So Angie identified a funding opportunity that we're going to use to kind of do a bit of a brief live demo of a funding opportunity review. And Angie mentioned, an initial scan and then a deep scan. So whenever I get a solicitation, I do a quick scan for some key information to see whether or not it's a good fit, and for deal breakers, first and foremost, the deadline, available funding, and match requirements. Match requirements to know whether or not, like the clients I'm working with can come up with the funding they need to match, but also available funding. Is it just $100,000 and they're doing one award, or is it $10 million and they're doing 10 awards? And what's the geographic scope of that funding in the eligible organizations? Is it worth my while? Is it going to be a lot of competition, or is for one or a few awards, or is there going to be 20, 30, 40 awards and say maybe just the state? I also want to ensure that as an applicant that I'm going to be eligible, or that the client's going to be eligible. And then also considering what's the level of effort versus the capacity. What are all the application components? How detailed are they? What are the page limits? What are the templates? What's the level of detail required in the budget and otherwise in the work plan? Do they require other studies that need to be prepared as part of this? Have those been prepared? And that's really kind of a make it or break it. So then I do it, if it looks like, there's none of those deal breakers and is a good fit, then I'll do a deeper scan to ensure I have all the key information. So Angie, I'm going to share my screen and just briefly kind of pick out a few things in here in this current solicitation. So. All right, so this is that solicitation that we pulled up. This is the Economic Development Administration, FY21 American Rescue Plan, Build Back Better Regional Challenge, NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity. So first thing, the deadline. This is actually a two-phase solicitation, which is definitely important to note. But the first phase for concept papers is due Eastern time. It's very important to know what the time zone is. I have missed that in the past before I was as thorough as I am. So noting that, making sure you have sufficient time to pull this together. Jump out right away is the eligible applicants might say, you're local government, state, county, city, or other political subdivision. Great. But this is really for consortiums. So that's further down. If you want to go through the whole solicitation to ensure you fully understand the eligible applicants and what the target and the focus is. And so this is for just the lead organization, but it must be as part of a consortium. So continue to scroll down. I'm going to then, start to better understand. Jumped ahead of me right there. What's the solicitation about? What are the key activities they're looking to fund? And I mentioned, I down below for the phase one, there isn't a match requirement. But there's a lot of information about what this opportunity is looking to fund. In fact, when Angie sent this to me, I got pretty excited about this and some of the communities I work with. So I was happy to dive deeper into this. But phase one is going to fund technical assistance grants, 50 to 60 across the country. And then phase two, 20 to 30 of those 50 to 60 can receive $25 to $75 million or up to $100 million to fund projects. So, understanding that the actual requirements of this one are just a concept paper. So it's not much of a lift, and you can get up to $500,000. So, to me, that's maybe not a significant lift if you have the proper partnerships lined up around the proper types of projects. But, it's really important to make sure you're scanning through all this. You're understanding what the direction, the angle are, the requirements are to make sure you are positioned and you're just not wasting your time. It's important to get well-versed at doing this to make sure you can quickly eliminate a grant proposal from consideration or a grant solicitation, because you don't want to waste your time working on these. They're huge lifts. You need to be fully dedicated. And if you're not going to be successful, and you have I'm sure you have lots of other things to work on as well.
Can I just interject here? So, this is coming from ARPA, right? This is coming out of the stimulus funds. This is one of the early solicitations. And sometimes the solicitation will tell you, here's the projects that we want you to submit. This one's not as prescriptive. It's pointing you to investment priorities. You have to go to this other document to see whether or not it fits. But if you do go there, those of you that are doing clean energy and climate work, they're interested in regional industry growth for energy and climate activities.
Okay, so Angie, we're at 1, so I could spend, easily the next hour pouring through this, and I'm continuing to review this myself. But
maybe you focus for just a second on score boosters. What do we mean by that, and why are they so important?
Yeah, so score boosters, part of this I'm going to jump to, when I'm reviewing this, when I do my initial scan, I'm also going to look at the criteria and see what is their scoring criteria and consider is there extra points for partnerships, specific types of partnerships, disadvantaged communities? What do they consider to be a disadvantaged community, or is there an equity component? In this one, there is. Whether or not there's a match requirement, do they consider leveraged funds? And then how many points can you get for leveraged funds? Are there particular locations? In this case, they're talking about, it's not relevant to California, but they're 10% of the funds they want to go to coal communities to transition away from coal. So that would be something to note. And, certainly if I'm a coal community, I know I'm going to have a leg up and want to emphasize that as well. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for to kind of boost my score, and then identify, like, if it's match, what can I use as match to get that as high as possible.
Right. And so, the reason Josh is usually successful at these is because he's nailing the language that the grantor needs to hear. He's nailing the instructions. He's focused on getting as many points as he possibly can, rather than just telling the random story he wants to tell. And so get what you want, but craft it into the language that the grantor needs to hear. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll share my screen now, and we'll move on to just one more slide I have for you before we do Q&A, which are starting to come in. Please do continue to add questions, and thank you, Josh. So I do want to point out that SEEK is working on this. We hear you loud and clear. And so we've developed a funding resources page where we are trying to make it easier for you to understand what opportunities you have to fund all of your super important and critical energy and climate initiatives. And so, what I want to do here is just kind of point out where you can go for this. So if you, actually somebody, maybe Gabby can put the link in the chat box while I do this, but I want to show you the actual page. So if you just go to our eecoordinator.info, go to funding resources, up at the top here is some featured active opportunities. These are our funding opportunities you might be able to apply for today if they're applicable to you. If you click on them more, it'll give you a little bit more. It'll go right to the financial opportunity or the funding opportunity. Down here, though, I also want to point out there's a how-to guide, meaning ways to get funded. And we broke that up by internal and external best practices, meaning what are some general best practices for how you might get funded, how you might come up with money internally or externally. Beyond that, we have pointing you to databases where you can actually go and find resources. And so you might be aware of the usual suspects, Empower Innovation, Funding Portal, California Funding Wizard, blah, blah, blah. And those are great. And then we created our own. So we have a new database where we are looking more broadly at what it means to fund energy and climate initiatives. And so we welcome you to take a look at that. It is not showing active solicitations. It's mainly looking at programs that we think may be recurring. So you can take a look and see which ones of these should I be tracking? Which ones of these are a good fit? And should I start preparing for if it's going to come again? And then finally, we're also tracking called pre-funding opportunities, which are all those things I mentioned, all those administrative actions where agencies have direction and funding and they need to figure out how to design a program that works for you all on the ground. We are really hoping to advertise and promote your participation in these input opportunities so that these agencies that really want to get it right can get it right. And so we'll continue to populate those here. And if you have the time to participate, we encourage you to do that. Okay, that's all I wanted to share on that front. And if you do have input on ways that we can otherwise support you, please contact me anytime, because we're looking to support local governments doing, trying to identify funding in better and better ways. And then with that, I just want to go to Q&A. So let's see here. I've got some questions that have started to pile up. So the first question I have here, and if all the panelists would put their screens back, their webcams back on, are JPAs eligible for the Boost program? So that's for you, Ina.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the Boost program is actually only open to cities and towns, but we certainly work with cities to reach out to different partners in their communities and to help build partnerships. So yeah, just for cities and towns, at least in this round.
And it looks like some of these might have been answered. Kim Springer has asked, are funding programs available for disadvantaged communities to do the work in other communities, those communities responsible for the DAC's air quality? How interesting, or other issues that affect them?
I'd like to address that just real quick, Angie, just to say, you can really, while it may not count, for example, towards a disadvantaged community, typically we have carve outs for disadvantaged communities, or we may provide that kind of booster and score like Josh mentioned, but our grants are often open to all communities. And if you can demonstrate that your project will be impactful and beneficial and it has these downstream benefits that you're referring to, then it could still be a really strong project. So encourage you to apply in any case and really emphasize those benefits.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katrina. And then for the next question, for municipalities in need of a tech partner and or tech transfer facilitation program, what mechanisms exist for startups to use so they are visible and can be found? Katrina, do you want to take that one too?
Yeah, and I saw it on the website that Angie just shared as well. So Empower Innovation is the CEC's online networking platform, and there are a ton of technology developers, and you can sort by technology area. But then there's also a place for local governments to also feature themselves as well. So and you can begin to actually message across the platform, so you can connect with people directly on the platform. It's sort of replacing our LinkedIn. We had a LinkedIn space, but this is Empower Innovation. And so I really encourage you to you can create your own member profile, but then also create your organizational profile if you're interested. And I highlighted very quickly at the end, we have a call for places. So if you want to be a host demonstration site, you can say, hey, we've got this location and we need energy storage technology developers to come. And Josh has a little anecdote, maybe. He was able.
Yeah,
I was
successful. Yeah, so I got $7 million from the CEC EPIC program for long duration storage partner. So we got the #1 score. So, we successfully used Empower Innovation to find a partner we weren't otherwise connected with. So I, encourage you to use that.
Thank you.
And the last thing I want to share here is also on the SEEK website is a technical assistance page where we have developed a directory of technical assistance, and it's not as good as a matchmaking program from Empower in terms of what you're asking for to look for partners. But if you want to access free of charge technical assistance from experts that are somehow other source to support you, we are compiling that here, and you can search by topic. Okay. Let's see here. So the next question from Nick Peterson. Albany is a small community that has limited city staff resources. Most goes to fire, police, and recreation, but are very interested in being a test city for very innovative approaches to energy transition, like electrification of transportation and buildings. Would love to partner with others under the EPIC program. How do we get involved? So do you want to just reiterate that, Katrina?
Yeah, and you can even reach out to me directly if you want to be one of the first or one of the earliest places on the website, because I think one of the things about having key partnerships is having additional resources. So people that may have already done it before in the past, and they can actually help you kind of navigate the EPIC grant funding opportunities. So that's another reason for partners, and you can reach out to me direct. I can share my email.
And he's also asking what grant writing assistance is available to get person powered to submit these. And we talked about this actually before. A lot of state and federal agencies are very aware that technical grant writing assistance is becoming more and more necessary. And I think EPIC doesn't have it yet, but it's under consideration. ENA's program is technical assistance. It applies specifically to Strategic Growth Council programs, right, ENA?
Yeah, we do actually provide some technical assistance for other programs as well. So some of the programs that are at the Air Resources Board or Caltrans. So certainly reach out if you're interested in those. And then our Boost program is really kind of across the board helping with grant writing for a number of different different programs.
Yeah, Boost. If you can qualify for Boost, I would.
Angie, I'll add that there are vendors, technology providers out there that I know that take the lead on preparing these grants and take that whole lift. So if you put yourself out there as a host community that can move quickly and provide the information that's needed, then there are organizations, there are businesses that will take the lead. You got to make sure you vet those, make sure it's worth your while, because I've seen that go plenty of ways. It's not usually successful, but at the same time, Katrina and I were talking about an organization yesterday, or not Katrina, somebody else from the CEC, about an organization that I'm aware of that's gotten several microgrid grants with various municipalities that usually have taken the lead, and I don't think that host communities had to pay for a grant writer.
And I'll just say too, like, definitely always reach out and ask about technical assistance opportunities, because we are not the only ones who are doing TA. So certainly a lot of times state agency staff can be really helpful as well in putting together a lot of, some of the early pieces and helping you sort of build a project that makes sense for the program. So yeah, make sure to just reach out and find out what resources are available.
Got a question here too. How could a startup tech IP be included in the list of tech solutions? Does anybody want to take that one? Maybe Katrina.
Can you repeat it again? Sorry, Angie, can you say? Sorry.
Yeah, how could a startup's tech IP be included in the list of tech solutions? And so that might be a question to you directly, since this was more for local governments.
Yeah, and I'll just say you may want to look at our entrepreneurial ecosystem programs, so I can send some links to those there because there may be some opportunities to connect with others. So you can do technological advancements, but not necessarily a demonstration project, for example.
Yes. So I actually, Gabby, do you see any other hands raised or anything I've missed?
No, I think we are good unless anyone else has any other questions.
Okay, well, I will. One trend I'm sort of seeing is, there's a lot of money getting poured right into climate resilience right now, and even energy resilience, wildfire resilience. Some of those the focus of this forum is specific to sort of energy and emission reductions, more so, but some of those opportunities can also have the co-benefit of reducing emissions. And I just wonder if anybody could speak to that, how they're seeing that sort of translate into solicitations, or what to look for in a resilience solicitation so that you can also embed emission reductions into it.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. I think, and yeah, would love other thoughts as well. I think that it definitely goes both ways. So certainly a lot of the programs that are doing mitigation as well, there are opportunities for adaptation. But for some of the adaptation projects, I think, moving towards using transit that is, going to be really reliable and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but making sure also that it is ready for a changing climate. Looking towards particularly urban greening and urban tree canopy with extreme heat is another really important piece to be thinking about. And there's a lot of work that's been happening there. And then I think as well for a lot of the adaptation related work, again, this keeps coming back to partnerships, but partnerships, there's really a lot of research showing that building partnerships and networking and creating that sort of community resiliency is really, really critical. And so a lot of the projects that we're seeing come down the pike are really focused also on, pieces like workforce development, high road jobs, and making sure that, we're moving towards a more resilient future overall, while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the specific projects that we're working on.
Thank you, Ina. And one last question, just for everybody's sort of brief lightning round response is just, can you just help us sum up what's your single best piece of advice for local governments working in the next couple of years in this new funding paradigm? What should they be doing now? And any input on how to tackle sort of new equity requirements and goals would be great.
I can go. Okay, I'll just plug the investment plan. So one of the things is when you look at our investment plans and you look at our initiatives, you're going to see where the dollars are going. They're going to be spent more broadly, and you can also work to shape them and shape the initiatives and solicitations themselves. But one of the pieces that Josh mentioned was look, kind of preparing yourself and setting yourself up even before the grant application or grant solicitation may even be released. Like you already have some ideas in mind and you're looking out for opportunities. And so this can help you kind of get prepared, start thinking about projects. And then when the solicitation is ready to go, you already have partners and others in mind. You have some thoughts on technologies that you might want to demonstrate and so forth. So that would be my main suggestion. Look at the investment plan, follow it, and see, get ready for solicitations to come out.
Josh, do you want to chime in? And I'm just going to share the upcoming events for the week while we sum up here.
Sure. I just add it's, go after one and be dedicated to it and get it. And you'll find that if you are successful in getting an application in for a meaningful project, there tends to be a good snowballing effect. I've had a lot of success in turning some, a $1 or $2 million federal grant then into recently, $7 million CEC grant, another $1 million or $2 million from the federal government, some CPUC SCHIP rebates, where all of a sudden $2 million in initial funding turned into 15, 16, 17 million dollars, and actually almost $20 million of external funding through tax incentives and stuff as well. So you kind of get the project going, and you find it starts to be a magnet, and now you have resources that you can leverage to use as match for other opportunities across different arenas.
I think I'm going to go ahead and end us here. Thank you all so much for being part of today's discussion and for the good questions. And I want to encourage you to please fill out the post-session survey so we get your feedback, and please visit us at our next upcoming sessions this week. Thanks for your time.